Hey guys, Jake Julius here from Contrarian Daily. So today the topic that I want to talk about is where I get my information and news sources from. Now, you'd think that this is probably pretty self-explanatory. You turn on channel 7 or channel 9 and there's the news, but actually no, because the Australian mainstream media has become extremely hegemonic and it's very unreliable if you're looking for a well-rounded and nuanced sort of news, because those terms actually don't really exist in the news sphere anymore, unfortunately, in terms of mainstream media. So people are in droves moving to more alternative media sources in terms of podcasts and independent sources of news and information. So today in this video, what I want to outline is where I get my news from. It's obviously pretty subjective to me, and if you've got any suggestions, please leave it in the comments, because I'd love to see where you guys get your news from and who you think is trustworthy. So I'm going to break this video down into two main parts. The first one is going to be news, and that's just straight news where you can see what's going on, current affairs, what's happening in the world, and you can tailor it to whatever kind of news you like to hear. Second of all, I'm going to be talking about education and information and purely engaging with ideas and becoming a more well-rounded and more intelligent person. So in terms of just news, it really just depends what kind of things you like listening to. What I'd really recommend anybody to do, and particularly if you're quite new in this space, is to get a well-rounded view of different sort of news sources and see what works best for you. See who makes sense for you, and then you can adjust your news diet accordingly. So if we're talking about conservative news, which is something that I tune into quite regularly, I would really recommend the Daily Wire. Now, the Daily Wire is a news media company in America, but it's also kind of an agency for alternative voices in the States. You've got Ben Shapiro, Michael Knowles, and Matt Walsh, who do daily shows, and then you've got the Candace Show as well, which Candace Owens is the host of. Now, these guys, they focus a lot on American politics. I personally find that very entertaining. If that's not your cup of tea, then you might not find it as entertaining as I do. But they also talk about world issues as well. They talk about a lot of cultural issues, and we all know that there are plenty of them going on. Furthermore, they're very unapologetic about their conservatism, and they're very funny as well. There's a lot of good satire there, and that is something that I listen to most days. I love to listen to Ben Shapiro, Michael Knowles, and Matt Walsh, and that's a big part of my news diet. From more of the left side of politics, there are some really reliable people who do give great information out, and some of them that I would recommend would be Kulinski. He's somebody who has a podcast that I would really recommend to you if you wanted to go and understand the left side of things again. Once again, this is quite focused on American politics. That's what they focus on. So if you're not interested in that, then it's probably not for you, but he's great as well. And if there's something that the left have done that is wrong, he's the first to call it out. So he's pretty, he's a pretty reasonable guy. Furthermore, Russell Brand is a really, really great one. Russell Brand's had a very colorful history. He had the whole Revolution book and did the tour where he put his face on the Che Guevara, and we've seen him evolve politically over time. He had a big campaign where he didn't vote, and then he wanted to vote Jeremy Corbyn, the socialist, in, and those are all things that I vehemently disagree with. However, I think now Russell has really come into his own in terms of a good, reliable source of information and news, because on his podcast, he breaks down stats and figures, and he looks at studies, and he looks at articles, and he basically gives a very, very holistic perspective on it. And he obviously comes from a place where he's quite obsessed with money and capital and billionaires, which is totally fair enough. But at the same time, he's also very interested in people. Temperamentally, Russell Brand would be very high in empathy, and he has some of those traits where he just wants everyone to be loved and to love each other, and it's quite nice sometimes. So I actually listen to Russell Brand quite a lot, and he's someone that I'd really recommend if you want to have more of an understanding from the left side of politics. Another great independent podcast that I would recommend to everybody would be Breaking Points with Crystal and Saga. These guys are a conservative guy and a liberal woman, and they have a podcast where they talk every day. The thing that I really like about these guys is that obviously they're on different ends of the spectrum ideologically. However, they agree on a lot. And that's the thing that we lose sight of sometimes, is that despite your differences with someone politically, you actually will have a lot in common. And that's an interesting thing, because I think that we actually agree on more than we disagree most of the time. Generally, we want our families to be happy, we want to have opportunities in life, we want to live a good life, and we want everyone else to be happy and have access to those opportunities as well. And fundamentally, that's what we all want. But I think that the different ends of the political spectrum, they just have different ways of getting there. And the differences that we often hold are actually more minute than we might think. Furthermore, if you like reading, then Substack is a really great one. You can go and find Matt Taibbi or Glenn Greenwald, two of my absolute favorite journalists. Substack is basically a place where independent journalists can go to make a living. They can print their work and their articles and their content, and then they can have a subscriber base for a few dollars a month or whatever it is, and they can make their living like that. They don't have to be beholden to a news corporation. They can do their own thing. So that's something that I'd really recommend, especially if you want to donate a bit of money and have a subscription base to support independent journalism. In terms of quick, easy access to news, there are a few really great Instagram pages that I would recommend. A few of the ones that I follow are Guff News, GUFF, Scriber, SCRIBERR. Those are two great pages that report the news, and they're not biased, and they basically just tell you what's going on in the world. Another one that I really enjoy is Tilda, TLDR, and I think the guy's name's Jack who runs it, and he also has a page on YouTube where he posts some really good video content as well. So TLDR, I'd recommend that one big time. Another good few pages on Instagram is Ruptly, RUPTLY, and Jerry News. Furthermore, if you are somebody who likes to keep up to date what's happening around the world, you enjoy geopolitics and to know what's happening in Asia and Africa and the Middle East, etc., some of the ones that I would recommend for you would be Middle East Eye and Middle East Monitor. Those ones are really quite informative about what's happening in the Middle East at the moment. And obviously there's always interesting things happening in the Middle East. There's a lot of conflicts going on over there. Just recently we've seen the Kazakhstan and Russia debacle, where we had protests going on in Kazakhstan, and they were posting a lot of video footage about that. So that was really cool. Whenever there's Israel-Palestine dramas happening, those guys will be all over it. And it's quite a good source of information. Africa is more of a hard one because obviously they're a little bit more isolated and it's a bit harder to get news out, but Everyday Africa is a good page that I'd recommend following. Furthermore, RT News is another great one, Russian Times. Now, I actually post about this one quite a lot, and I really love their news stories. They post funny things that are happening around the world and informative things and revolutions in AI technology and different crises that are happening around the world. So they're ones that I'd really recommend following as well. Another cool one, an interesting one that I follow is called Ground News. And basically what they do is they will find a story and then they will take a bunch of networks and they will see who's reporting on it. So sometimes you'll get a story and it'll be 50% of the left are reporting on it, and then 30% of the center of reporting on it, and then 20% of the right-wing news publications are reporting on it. So it'll actually tell you if you are right-leaning, you may have missed this story, or if you're on the left, you may have missed this story. So it's actually interesting. It's also interesting to see what's being reported and by who and what's not being reported. Now the last one, sometimes you've got to give the devil their due, and it is Vice World News. Now I detest Vice and what they've become. They're a woke sanctuary. Back in the day, there used to be Shane Smith doing documentaries about the cannibal warlords of Liberia, etc. And they were really edgy. They were right on the edge of everything, and they were doing awesome documentaries. They still do those documentaries, but unfortunately they've been swallowed by wokeness. So I don't really like Vice anymore, but Vice World News does a segment every week where they say things that are happening in the world that you might not have seen. So basically it'll be a 10-slide Instagram post of all of these different things that have happened in the world. So I would actually recommend following them, and it is quite entertaining to see what's happening in the world. If you can scroll past all of the lefty lunacy, there will be one or two cool stories in there every week. On to the second part now. Now we want to talk about education, engaging with ideas and just sharpening your tools. And this is, for me, what is most entertaining. I find it extremely exciting to engage with these ideas, and there are a few places that I go to do so. One of the most important ones for me has been Oxford Union. Now, if you go on YouTube and you type in Oxford Union, you're likely to come across Oxford University's YouTube page. And now, obviously, they're a very prestigious university in the United Kingdom, and they attract really amazing intellectual guests. And they have regular speeches where somebody will come and address the union, the Oxford Union, and then they'll have Q&As. But even more importantly, they have debates. Now, debates and watching debates and understanding both sides are the most important way that you can engage with ideas, because you get to see both sides of the perspective and make up your own mind on things. Who has the better point? Go and research what they said further, and then you can actually sharpen your tools and understand your perspectives and your philosophical guidances a little bit more. What I would recommend when watching these debates is to try and remove any preconceived ideas that you have. The best way to do it is to engage with the debate and the idea in a way that you're trying to agree with them. So you're trying to see the best in their argument. Because if you go in there and you think, oh, this person, they're not really of my philosophical ilk, and you dismiss everything that they say, then you might miss a few golden nuggets and a few ways that you might be able to adjust your thoughts. So definitely go on YouTube, subscribe to Oxford Union, and check them out. They've had the likes of Jordan Peterson, Peter Hitchens, Douglas Murray, all of the absolute heavyweights debating fundamental ideas of religion and politics and existential questions. It's really, really awesome stuff, so go check that out. Another great YouTube channel for debates and for talks is called Intelligence Squared. Basically, it's a similar thing. They do debates between heavyweight intellectuals about really deep questions. So if you want to go down that wormhole, then by all means, please do. A few more key debates, more individual debates that I would recommend. A few classics would be Jordan Peterson with Sam Harris about religion. I'd also recommend Jordan Peterson's debate with Slavoj Žižek about Marxism. That's a really good one. And also Christopher Hitchens did a debate with Tariq Ramadan, which is another really thrilling one. So there are heaps of them out there. It all just depends what you're really interested in and what you want to engage with. And just lastly on that, try and avoid sticking to owned compilations, because there are a lot of good SJW owned compilations on YouTube, people getting destroyed, and that's awesome. And that can arm you with actually really good responses to arguments and to stupid arguments. But try and avoid that, because if you actually get both sides of the argument, it's much more entertaining, it's much more thought-provoking for you, and it won't allow you to get stuck in that ideological echo chamber. Another great one is the man himself, Joe Rogan. His podcast is absolutely phenomenal for engaging with ideas. There are a few reasons for this. He gets people from all different ends of life. He gets scientists, he gets doctors, he gets comedians, he gets philosophers, he gets, guys who work with mushrooms for a living. Joe Rogan has pretty much had it all. And you can engage with so many different types of ideas. And the best part about it is that Joe Rogan isn't some sanctimonious intellectual. He's actually just like me and you. And he asks questions that you or I might want to ask if we were in his position. So that's one of the best things about it, is that we go on that journey with Joe on those podcasts where he's learning about things and we're learning at the same time. So we definitely recommend the Joe Rogan podcast. And finally, a couple of YouTube channels that I would recommend would be Crash Course. Crash Course is really cool. It's basically this dorky dude and his professor who made this channel where they do these animations and talk about, events throughout history and whatnot. And basically they just give crash courses in things, and they do it in a really cool and engaging way. So I'd recommend those guys. And another one that I'd recommend is the Armchair Historian. The Armchair Historian is fantastic animations, very engaging, and they'll teach you all about history. And obviously history is probably the subject that we need to understand the most. And if you can have a good conversation and hold your own about history, then you're going down the right path. So that's it for me today, guys. I hope you enjoyed the content. Thank you so much for tuning in. And wherever you are, please make sure to like, subscribe, comment, share, all the good stuff. Thank you so much. This is Jake Julius, and this has been the Contrarian Daily.